Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the podcast, Indestructible Souls. It's been a minute. I missed you guys. I hope you guys missed me. And I want to say thank you for all the continued support of supporting the show, supporting the podcast, and also supporting Beauregard Therapy. My name is Jonathan Beauregard. I am your host of the podcast, Indestructible Souls. And I want to thank you guys for continuing to join in. And I've been on a bit of a hiatus, been really busy, fatigued, and working really hard. And the show, it's been a few weeks since I've been on, and really it's just been about getting some rest. And we had a holiday, we had Independence Day, and then we also had Father's Day. So now we're back. And I want to thank you guys for continuing to join in and offer any feedback. Um, and so today we're going to continue with our series on athletics and mental health. Um, my friend Amar will not be able to join us. Today is his anniversary. So he's out celebrating with his wife. I don't know how long they've been married. It's been quite a while. But today, here we are. And so I want to continue the show. But before we get there, a couple of things. Don't forget, you can reach me at Beauregard Therapy. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist located in the city of Colton. And you can reach me by phone. You can email me. You can reach me on Psychology Today. Check out my profile. And, the practice is constantly growing. And so you could look me up if you need some help, family, couples, um, for all sorts of mental health things, work related type stuff. So check me out. So I want to get into the topic or the show, and this is our second part of athletics and mental health. Now, why is this important? Why is this important to talk about? Well, a couple of weeks ago, we did talk about how athletics introduced at an early age can be very beneficial. It can come with some issues, but at the same time, for young boys and girls, it can be very, very beneficial to their overall development, both socially, physically, mentally, and all of those things. So today, what I really want to talk about is the student athletics or the student athlete aspect of mental health and athletics. Why is this so important? Well, as I drive down the street, I'm seeing that we're finally getting back to sports, right? Which is a good thing. We're finally getting back to somewhat of being normal. The kids are being able to get back out and play football. I think football season's coming up. Um, Basketball season is about to end, but we've also seen that there's been a lot of talk in the media recently about some of the athletes that talks about mental health. Now, when we talk about student athletes, we're talking a whole nother realm. And I want to delve into this a little bit. I'm not going to go too far into it because I could talk all day about it. But when we talk about athletics and how it affects mental health, it can be a two-edged sword. You could check out the show that aired a few weeks ago when we really talked about the benefits of introducing our kids to athletics, whether, football, baseball, maybe, or putting them into some type of social group, some type of club or whatever it may be. Because I do believe it is a microcosm of the society that they're going to face when we're talking about building resiliency, we're talking about building confidence, we're talking about building social skills, and all of those things that I see a lot of our kids lack in this day and age, especially in the video game age and the social media age, the internet age, and all of those things. So I think it's important that we provide opportunities for our kids to feel success, to feel connected, and understand that in order to make it in this world, in order to make it in life in general, but especially in a competitive setting, that there's skill sets that athletics can fall, that athletics can breed. When we talk about being a student athlete, I'm getting into the high school and college years. Why was this so important? Now, being a former student athlete myself, student athletes are under, and I don't want to downplay other students that are not in athletics as if they're not under any other pressure. However, student athletes, especially when it comes to mental health, we're seen very differently, right? So, on top of the pressure of going to school, getting good grades, there's also the pressure to play, to perform, and really never show weakness. Now, like I said, I've been, a good portion of my life I was a student athlete, and it comes with perks, but I don't think people ever really understood the mental stress that it puts on students. Now, I'm gonna give you some statistics, and I'll go ahead and read them. Something that my brain is not what it used to be. So, one of the things and one of the statistics is that, especially with the COVID, but even prior to COVID, but let's talk about the COVID real quick, is that mental illness, when we talk about depression and anxiety, other social disorders, feeling overwhelmed and stress, has risen amongst student athletes up to 250%, which means because of the COVID and because of the pandemic, the one thing that provided relief has now been taken away or has been altered. Can't get outside, can't run around, so forth. But even prior to COVID, 25% of student athletes suffered some type of clinical depression. 25%. Now, when you think about all the athletes, when we talk about high school and we talk about college, look at all of those athletes. 25% of those athletes suffered some type of clinical depression or anxiety, and to that degree. Now, here's the problem with that. Let's talk numbers. We're still talking numbers. Only 10% of that 25% sought help. 10%. And let's talk about why, and one reason why this is so important. The problem is we in society, and I've experienced this myself, is that we as student athletes are often put on a pedestal, right? We're the big men on campus. We're the big women on campus. We are seen as the tough ones. We're seen as the leaders. We're seen as, to some degree, invincible, and to some degree that we can overcome anything. But think about it. 25% of us, and this isn't even talking about the social stuff, whether home is good and all this other kind of stuff. We're not even getting into that. We're talking about suffering from some type of depression or anxiety, right? But only 10% will even seek help. One of the reasons why is because we do get put on that pedestal, we're not allowed to show vulnerability. We always have to be tough. And in fact, we're tasked with being the leader and carrying other people or pulling other people forward because we're supposed to be the perfect ones. Now, when we talk about depression, when we talk about anxiety, when we talk about all these other things that student athletes suffer from, yet again, before we even get to some of the other stuff I'm going to talk about with this, why is this important? Why is this a topic we need to talk about? Well, I think athletics is a big part of not only our community, But that's where a lot of our we get our social, we put a lot of value in it, we put a lot of emphasis on it, and so forth. But guess is what is one of the leading causes of death amongst student athletes? You guessed it, suicide. Suicide, when we talk about student athletes, suicide is one of the leading causes, if not the leading cause, death. We could talk about we can talk about the what what's more important, and I know a lot of times you know the academics come second, and the emphasis is on the athletic part. I know for a lot of us, that's a way that we paid for college. That was our way out. Here's what I'm suggesting. As parents, as family members, when it comes to being involved and your kids are now deciding to be student athletes, and I'm going to go back to this word, and this word is very important. This goes back to balance. Now, not all of us are going to be elite athletes. Can a lot of us get to the point where it can pay for school? Absolutely. Will all of us get to the professional level? No. Just follow the numbers. Most of us won't. But a lot of us, the majority of us, can have an enriched life by adding athletics along with the academics and so forth. Even to the point where some of us used to play for free in our adulthood, go to work, and then still go play sports. And I never do it again because I'm too old, but whatever. But let's talk about that balance. The first thing is, I think, well, I got to back up just a little bit. Here's why this balance is so important. As kids begin to embrace that student athlete role and all that comes with it, the problem is we're now creating this pseudo personality, this pseudo sense of self, this pseudo sense of acceptance that's not real. What do I mean by that? As we know, the problem is a lot of we're placing our personal value, we're placing our personal value in our personal acceptance because we're connected to this sport, and we're often seen as, for the lack of a better term, celebrities. We're seen as being, tough. We're seen as being good at something, as being whatever it may be. The problem is, yet again, that's not the real world. And once that goes away, look at how that can play on the psyche. So this where it goes back to balance. And I've seen where it goes both ways, where the pressure to perform athletically becomes too much, then kids become anxious and depressed and they shy away from it. Or where they do really good and become successful at it, which isn't a bad thing, but then we still lose balance because then that's where all the eggs go. That's where all the eggs go. And I remember being as great as I was at Cajon High School and check my resume. I remember after my senior year how the energy shifted. How the energy shifted. Those same coaches, people, and whatever it may be that would literally lie and steal for you won't even accept your phone call. those same people that would literally be willing to lie and steal and let you date their daughters wouldn't even look your way. And then if you don't meet the expectations going to the next level, then you're a flop, or you're not good enough, because your acceptance came with that title of student athlete or being an athlete. So just that aspect alone, we haven't even talked about the pressures of being both dual and student athlete. And so I remember for myself, I had a very false sense of self and a false sense of acceptance that in the real world, when things didn't go my way, I didn't know how to handle it, because I was used to people catering to me. I was used to people moving out the way when I walked in the room. I was used to people saying, "Oh, that's so and so. Oh, don't mess with so and so." I was used to people rolling out the red carpet. But when that went away, and now I'm left with the academics, or I'm left with the pressure of having to perform and having to continue to be great, that's a lot of pressure. And I remember, so coming out of high school, I end up going to Long Beach State. It wasn't pretty. I didn't meet the expectations of what people would have thought, considering my accolades in college, right? I mean, my accolades in high school. But yet, I was still a great player. But for me, that was the only way out. The only reason why I buckled down for academics was to play the sport initially. But when things begin to change, and we're talking about the pressure, we're talking about getting good grades, we're talking about the family wanting something from you, we're talking about the coaches wanting something from you, we're talking about you literally not being able to have a bad day because you're supposed to be the tough one. You're supposed to be the perfect one. But when we talk about being a student athlete, let's get into some particulars. And so what I want parents to understand is that when we talk about this level of balance, is we're talking putting value not only on the athletic ability, but the academic ability, the social responsibility, and so forth. The responsibility to family. Some people may remember, but at least my sophomore year, junior year, this was life. This is what life was like. Get up, go to school, get up, go to practice. I mean, after school, go to practice, then go to your job, which we had a janitorial business. And then within between there, study. Friday nights was the football game. Saturday was study. Sunday was church. A little bit more studying. And there was this routine, but the emphasis was always on, there was the emphasis on obviously the academics. There was the emphasis on family. There was the emphasis on church. And but at the same time, as the demand and the stakes began to grow when it came to the academics and the athletics, that's when the pressure was tough, the toughest. And so often, what we do see is, like I said, you have those coaches that are willing to kill and steal for you, where we have some student athletes that get placated to and they get pushed along so we can win championships, and then they get pushed to the side, not being prepared for the next level, and then being thrown away once their athletic ability is no longer of use. And I've been through that as well when I went to New Mexico State, but that's a whole nother story. Now, so let's get to this balance thing. Why is this important when we talk about making sure that and it should almost be a requirement that at a high school level, And at a collegiate level and a professional level, if you want to really get into it, that counseling and therapy should be a part of it. At a minimum, should be offered and easily accessible. Here's why. We already talked about this in the past. For some of us, the athletics is the key. It's our way out. It's our haven. It's what makes us sane. It's what keeps us from not being depressed. However, for whatever reason, remember, 25% of us are suffering some type of anxiety, depression, or other type of mental health disorder. But of that 25%, maybe 10% is only going to seek help because of that stigma of being weak, right? So the reason why I say this needs to be a part of it, because even if a student athlete doesn't identify as being depressed or clinically depressed, that help, that resource can be very valuable to help navigate through all of the demands. So that's one. And when we talk about balance, I personally think the emphasis should be on academics, and the athletics is a means to an end. Here's what I mean by that. Like I said before, look at the statistics. Most of us aren't going to reach that elite level. But as we often see, when we get to that professional level and that goes away, things begin to tumble. Because a lot of times people don't have anything else to fall back on. And we often see, and I've done it too, when the sports go away, struggling to find and discover who we are. Because I remember I'm no longer the great football player. I'm just another dude looking for a job. I'm just another dude trying to make things work. Where before, it was a little different. So when we talk about balance, we're talking taking care of yourself, obviously physically, taking care of yourself mentally. We're talking having a support system. What do I mean by a support system? Sometimes it's good to get away from all the hype to just clear your head and be who you really want to be. Here's a cute example. I think it was my 11th grade year, and I say, and this is it'll make sense to you. So I remember my 11th grade year. I made all Inland Empire. This is in high school, right? And then they did a little, put your picture in the paper, and then they do the little bio, right? They do a little bio. Then they ask you who is your favorite celebrity, whatever it may be, and what was your biggest hobby or your favorite hobby. At the time, my favorite hobby was baking. When I put that in there, people looking at big, I was mean. Okay, whatever. I concede. I was mean. But when you look at, okay, who they believed who I was and what I portrayed, and then people said, okay, you a baker? That didn't fit the persona, that didn't fit what I was supposed to be, right? And like I say, it's a cute example. But what I'm saying is, a lot of times people have a persona of us or of student athletes that they're supposed to be something. And if you don't live up to that, the problem is a lot of student athletes try to live up to that and not be who they be themselves. And so sometimes we have to just get away from all the hoopla. We have to get away from all the hype to just allow ourselves to be human, to make mistakes, to work through our emotions, to connect with our families, and so forth. Because I don't think people who are not student athletes understand the demand and understand the pressure, especially at a high school and a collegiate level. My grades was pretty okay throughout high school, but I remember, you know, getting called into the office and, hey, what about this? What about that? But after my eligibility was up, they didn't care. They could care less if I dropped out. So a lot of the value is placed on what you can do for me, not who you are as a person. So we're talking balance, right? We're talking support. Parents, if your children are student athletes, make sure checking up on them. Make sure you're providing resources for them to obviously to study, to perform whatever sport that they're playing, but then that avenue for healing. What do I mean by healing? I mean physically and mentally. And I'm talking encouraging. I'm talking when we talk about putting value on them, not putting value on them based on just their ability to perform athletically. You know, and I hate to say this. I hate to say this, but this is real. This is real. Did some work in the schools, not a whole lot, through wraparound and other things. And especially for Black families, it was, I hate to say it, but I'm going to say it. To get parents involved in the academic process was like pulling shark teeth. Don't show up to parent teacher conferences. Don't show up to meetings with the teacher when the kids are doing bad academically. The saying was the only time Black parents show up was for sporting events or other type of talent shows or something like that. That's what I mean. When we only place value on the athletic part of it and don't place value on the academic part of it, don't place value on the mental health part of it, we're not doing our kids and our student athletes a service. Here's some other things I want you to consider when we talk about your kids as they enter this realm of being a student athlete is routine. Routine is important. And it's funny because I get a lot of kids. I've been getting a lot of kids in my practice, a lot of Black kids, a lot of Black boys. And some are athletes. And I'm gonna blame it on the generation. And I know I pick on this generation, Gen Z or whatever it may be. I know I pick on them. One of the things that athletics did teach me is that there's no such thing as easy. And whatever's in front of you, it's not about easy. It's about doing what it takes to overcome it or beating it. What I'm seeing with this younger generation is they're looking for easy. Looking for easy. So when I say routine, I'm saying is what happens is they're looking for, I want this. This is the goal that I want, but I don't want to do the work. But one of the things we can help kids with is here's the routine. Here's what works. I'm going to help provide the avenue for you to be successful. You just got to do the work. So when we talk about routine, we're talking about a study routine. We're talking about a practice routine. We're talking about time to get away and do things socially with family. We're talking about time to really heal yourself both mentally and physically. We're talking time with mom or dad or whoever is that person that's going to help work out some of those things that go through our head as student athletes. We're talking tutoring if they need it. We're talking putting an emphasis on having a well balanced life. And that's what I mean by routine. Here's the other thing. When we talk about placing value on a kid, and when I say kid, I mean I'm still talking at the collegiate level as well. Student athletes are held to a different standard. Some of it is warranted, some of it is not. We're held to a different standard. The problem is not all of us are able to live up to that standard. Here's what I'm getting at. Talk to your child, talk to your student athlete, and learn what the end game is. What's the goal? Now, I know the majority of us, if not all of us, want to make it to a professional level. But there's always a point that it becomes very apparent, guess what? You're not making it to the league. So here's what I mean by what's the end game. My goal up until I was well in my 20s thinking I was still going to go to the NFL. But it became apparent. So the goal was to get an education. So let's talk realistically about where this sport for student athletes, what's the end game? What's the goal? What's the purpose? Because for most of us student athletes, pretty soon, barring any injuries, we know pretty soon if we're going to that next level. But we got to have honest conversations and we got to have realistic expectations while giving 100%, while achieving something. But what's the purpose? What's the goal? Now, here's the other thing. Some of us parents want the professional level or whatever it may be. Some of us parents want that more than the kids want it. So we got to be honest about that. Because here's the thing. And I'm not saying we're going to crush any dreams. I'm saying we're going to be honest. I'm saying we're going to talk about the possibilities. I'm saying we're going to have the conversations. And I remember when someone had the conversation with me, and I'll never forget it. And I've always said they had me at the wrong position in college, but that's a whole nother story for the cigar lounge. But I remember my senior year at Northridge, and my line coach basically had the conversation with me like, look, it's your senior year. It ain't going to happen for you. Whatever. I had some choice words in my head, but having that conversation was heart-wrenching. But did I want to have that conversation with this coach who really, as far as I'm concerned, I ain't going to say he didn't care. I'm not going to say that. But at the same time, is that who I want to have this conversation with? Well, I'll say it this way. Is that the only person I want to have this conversation with? Because now I had to figure out what was next. I still felt at that moment that I was still good enough to make it. I felt they've always had me at the wrong position, whatever, yada, yada, yada. But this is the mentality. And the lifestyle that I wanted and what the expectation was, coming to that realization that guess what, this might not happen, was depressing. And my family could tell you at those transition points, what my depression looked like, which it's kind of funny because it probably looks like a normal day for most people, is I go sit somewhere and lay in the cut and sit quietly and be deep in thought. You couldn't talk to me. You couldn't pry my mouth open to talk to me. Deep in thought. And I remember, it's funny. I remember coming out of high school, I did terrible in the SATs. Terrible. And so for those of you who don't know, I was Prop 48, right? Basically had to sit out a year and go to school before I could play football because I did terrible in the SATs, which is another whole nother thing. But I changed the statistic because I actually graduated, and they say student athletes who don't pass the SATs or have the Prop 48 don't graduate. But even that stigma going in and going into college, oh, you playing? Nah, I got to sit out this year. Well, why? Well, I'm Prop 48, and all of a sudden they think you're stupid. So that's a whole nother angle to this topic, right? But when we talk about just that, got a Prop 48, so that weighs on the psyche. Now, here it is, the end of my career, and what am I going to do? People don't know who you are no more. People don't care. So now having to figure that out, because I always felt like I was good enough. I always felt like I'm better than you. So that, that's the mentality that we're bred with. Then now add in the academics. For me, it was just that important. So when we talk about having honest conversations, realistic conversations, allowing kids or allowing student athletes to tell you what their goal is, and then working and nurturing with that is going to be huge. I mean, I had some friends that I played with. They never, their goal wasn't to go to the NFL or whatever. I thought, why are you doing this? It's a brotherhood. We get to say we play college football. Not everybody gets to play. We got a free education, got a wonderful career out of it. Here's what I'm getting at. When we talk about being student athletes, there's a lot of pressure and a lot of responsibility that comes along with it. And we as parents, we as caregivers, we as family members have to understand what that process is. Now, here's the other thing, and I'm going to close out on this one. Mental health affecting the performance, because my grades aren't good enough. My social life isn't what it's supposed to be. My family life isn't what it's supposed to be. So now I have this anxiety, I have this depression, so therefore it's affecting my play. But guess what? People don't care that you're going through that stuff. You're supposed to be able to perform. Student athletes don't get to call off unless they really hurt. And I played injured, hurt, whatever you want to call it, many a time because it wasn't what we were supposed to do. For most of us, if I'm sick, we get to call off. Student athletes don't get to do that. Got to be injured. You got to be hurt. You have to sacrifice your body just to get a day off. So here's where I'm at. As we begin, we got one more part when we talk about mental health and athletics. And obviously today we're talking about the student athlete. It comes with a lot of pressure. We have to check on their mental health. We have to provide resources. Family has to be a support. We have to have real conversations. We have to have real expectations. And we have to understand what the student athlete's goal is. Not impose what we want And we have to understand that, guess what? Student athletes get to be vulnerable. We're not invincible, even though I thought I was. So don't forget, next week we're going to end with part 3. We will have some special guests, former professional athletes, because we want to talk about the professional level and how that mental health plays a part at the professional level. So yet again, this is your boy Jonathan Beauregard, also of Beauregard Therapy. You can check me out. Like I said, you can check me out on Psychology Today, located in Colton, California. And yet again, this has been Indestructible Souls. I want to thank you for being patient with me. Thank you for all the support. Thank you for all the love. And yet again, this has been another show in the books, and we're out.